So it's 10. We'll start in a couple minutes, I guess.
It's 4 here.
Yeah.
Who's this?
Somebody's got audio in the background. Is that?
Are you Rich?
Shouldn't be.
Something about singing happy birthday?
Yeah, let me, Mike should be just on the headphones, but shouldn't be coming through. But let me ask him to turn it down.
It's gone now. Oh, it's back.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
The surprises when working from home.
Yes. As many of us are now, so.
Yeah, exactly. You're on the same
Strange. As soon as Rich gets back, we'll get started.
Okay, that sounds like my cue. All right, let's get started. Hi, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good next day, good previous day, wherever you are on the time zone. This is the first of 2 IETF Newcomers intros to what the IETF meetings will be like. Obviously, it's different than we've usually done, as you'll hear. Our 2 speakers are Miriam and Karen. I'll be moderating, as in watching the chat room, posting links to the slides and the references in the slides. If you have any questions, post them in the chat, which you can see by the voice bubbles on the left-hand side of your screen. And with that, I'll turn it over. Oh, and I should mention, the slides will show up on the Newcomers page shortly. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start us off. As Rich mentioned, I'm Karen Donahue. I've been a long-time participant in the IETF process. Been a working group chair, been involved in the education activities, and also part of the network team. Next slide, please. So for starters, this is the welcome to the IETF. This is an IETF Newcomers overview. Next slide, please. The first thing about the IETF, and you may have already encountered it in your registration process, is the IETF Notewell. This is the set of rules and processes and rules that we follow by participating in any IETF activity, and that includes posting on a mailing list or attending any of the meetings. You are agreeing to abide by these rules. Next slide. Included in this are a number of BCPs. This is also part of the Notewell. It includes ones about the process. There's the anti-harassment procedures. We do have an ombuds team that we'll talk about a little bit later. There's a code of conduct, also IPR and patent issues. So all of these are covered as part of the Notewell, and you should familiarize yourself with those. Next slide. So ordinarily we would have a face-to-face meeting, and this slide would talk about all of the various activities that are specifically targeted at newcomers for an upcoming IETF. So this is a virtual meeting. It has some new features and slightly different ways of doing things, but we are still trying to have the same set of newcomer type of activities throughout the week. So for starters, we are doing the webinars. That we will be doing 2 of those. You're at the first one, there'll be a second one. The slides and the video from that will be posted as part of the materials going forward. The next thing that we're going to have is what we're calling a virtual quick connections. Ordinarily at a face-to-face meeting, we have this session which is really short you rotate around a room, you have short conversations with a number of people, and that gives a chance for newcomers to meet some familiar faces throughout the week, ask any really quick questions. We're going to do a virtual version of that on Thursday, July 23rd at 1500 UTC. We'll be using a platform called gather.town, and there'll be some additional information coming out about that. But this will be a quick way for you to get some faces and to replace a little bit of the social activities that would have occurred in a face-to-face meeting. Also, there are going to be a couple, we have two and we haven't scheduled them yet, so you'll need to follow. There'll be an additional newcomers email coming out giving you more details about this. But we'll have a couple of virtual coffee breaks during the week. We'll have some sort of a room or a space set up in our virtual platform that newcomers can drop by and ask questions or just say hello or meet each other. And the specific times of those have also not been announced yet. So you need to look for that the follow-on newcomers email. And finally, we are running our IETF Guides program, which is basically a mentoring program. You can go ahead and sign up now. The signups are available, and the matches are ongoing. And it's a one-on-one relationship with an experienced IETFer, and then you schedule amongst yourselves what meeting, any questions you have, and you arrange all of that with your guide. So those are the newcomer activities, and we'll talk a little bit more about them as we go through this brief, but I wanted to highlight them at this point. And also, as a newcomer, you're on a newcomers mailing list, and you'll get this information there as well. Next slide, please. So the scope of this presentation is all about preparing for an IETF meeting. So it includes information that we believe will be immediately useful to you as you attend your first or so IETF meeting, and some strategies to help make that meeting the most effective, whether it's in person or remote. It does not include things like history of the IETF or how to write a standard or a number of things like that. There is some additional tutorial information on the IETF website, and there is a YouTube channel that has a whole playlist that has a number of history briefings on that. A little bit of that information has changed, but most of it is still highly relevant. Next slide. And at this point, next slide. There we go. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Miriam, and she's going to talk about the IETF and related organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Can you hear me? I guess you can. Yeah, I was just seeing in the chat that some people had some audio issues, but I hope look, now it works perfect. I hope others can hear us. Yeah, so we're doing this a little bit like back and forth and interactive, also because I haven't done this tutorial the last couple of times, so Karen is much more involved in the actual virtual aspect of the meeting. So yeah, I'm Miriam Kühner, and my day job I work for the RIPE NCC, the Regional Internet Registry in Europe. And I've been running together with Karen the edu team for a number of years, but now I'm kind of just following a bit remotely, and I'm doing these tutorials from time to time. So please, Rich and Karen, jump in if there's anything I'm missing. So in this next section, I want to highlight a bit more how the IETF actually works. It's not just one, one body or one organization. There's actually a number of groups involved, and I just want to explain a bit how this all fits together. Next slide, please. To start, this is the IETF's mission. So the mission of the IETF is to make the internet work better by producing high quality, relevant technical documents that influence the way people design, use, and manage the internet. And in short, that basically means that the technology and the proposals that come out of the IETF are secure and stable and can be deployed effectively. Next slide, please. So yeah, the IETF is a standards organization. I don't know how many of you have maybe experienced other standards organizations, for instance, like the IEEE or ITU or ETSI. If you have, the IETF is it's a bit different. So, and maybe one difference is that you participate as an individual, so you don't necessarily represent your organization, your company, or your government. So there's no formal membership. Everybody participates as individuals and kind of tries to find the best solution as a group. There's also no formal voting. There's something we call rough consensus, and there's humming, and we'll get to that in some more detail. There is no no official government role. I mean, the governments participate, and I know there are also some special programs for government representatives to kind of know a bit more what's going on in the IETF. But it's mostly driven really by participation, by individual participation, and it's also not standards aren't mandated by the IETF or any other group of people or governments or organizations. A standard really becomes a standard once people are using it as a standard on the internet. So people are really trying to make the best standards so that as many people are actually willing to use it. It is obviously focused on internet technologies, and there are some kind of boundaries to other technical standards bodies that are defined on the internet, and there are also liaisons to other standards organizations. And it's pretty much works bottom up, and again, like by participation by individuals. Let's go on to the next slide. Here you can see the number of areas. So the IETF is structured in areas, and these areas focus on different topics. And you can see here some descriptions of the focus of each of these areas. And then you have working groups that fall within these areas. So at the moment, there are about 7 areas and roughly 130 working groups. Not all of them will be meeting during the IETF week, but you can find them all on the website. And maybe also to mention here, each of these areas has 2 or 3 area directors, and they kind of form the IESG, and I will get to that later, except for the general area, actually, that's chaired by the IETF chair, whereas all the other groups are have elected or selected area directors. Let's go on to the next. Yes, so this is interesting. The IETF and consensus. And I said earlier, there's no voting, no formal voting. And there's an IETF mantra from the early days of the IETF, and it's still they still stick with that. It's we reject kings, presidents, and voting, and we believe in rough consensus and running code. Now, what's rough consensus? I mean, we all have an idea of what consensus means if you talk to people in a group. But rough consensus, it's actually really nicely defined in the Rfc that's referred to at the bottom of the slide. And it really means that everybody is listened to, and all the concerns are addressed, but they're not necessarily all accommodated. So if I have a concern about a proposal or about a solution, it's been discussed and it's been addressed by the rest of the group, but it doesn't necessarily mean it can be solved. So in the end, it's kind of the best solution that everybody can live with, but not necessarily the perfect solution. So there are dissenting opinions, and they're heard and discussed, and often also like passionately discussed, but they're not necessarily kind of derailing the process, and they're not necessarily stopping a solution from being developed. So how do we measure rough consensus? I mean, there are some people maybe speak up and have concerns in their discussions, but there's also humming. So you might sit in a working group, and the working group chair might say, so who's for solution A? And then people go like, And then the working group chair might, ask another question, who's for solution B? And then another group of people might hum a bit higher, like a bit louder, hum. And then you kind of have an idea, like what the feeling is in the room. Sometimes it's not so easy. You can, then it's maybe equal, and you have to have more discussions about what solution is the preferred one. But you kind of get an idea of what the room feels. And another really good advantage of humming is that it's anonymous. So if you stick up your hand, everybody can see, you see like, oh, this person is kind of like solution A, whereas I'm like the solution B. If you're humming, you don't really see that, or you can't really, see who's humming except maybe the person next to you. but it's a much more anonymous way of building consensus. But it's really a building process, and the session chair, the working group chair, is their responsibility to work on that and to build that consensus so that everybody can live with it in the end. And also important is it's not all done at the meetings. It's actually the mailing lists are a very important part of building consensus. So in most cases, a discussion or a decision is carried over onto the mailing list, and then the working group chairs continuing the discussion and the consensus building there. Yes, next slide, please. And this is, yeah, so this is part of the decision building process, and the humming is definitely part of the IETF culture. And then there are a few other aspects that I would like to stress. It's fairly informal. Also dress code, where you don't really see that much at the virtual meeting, but also in physical meetings. People love wearing t-shirts. It's fairly informal. People are very kind of, also informal in their interaction with each other. And they're quite passionate and vocal sometimes in the groups, in the working group sessions. And sometimes you might feel like, well, are they fighting with each other, or they're just basically having a really engaged debate. And also a lot of people know each other for a long time. And that also changes or has an influence on the way they communicate. So that can sometimes be a little intimidating, but don't feel put off by that. If you have a comment, or if you have concerns, or if you have something to add, or you bring a specific expertise to it, then people will listen to you. So technical excellence is really also highly valued. And so don't be shy to participate if you are already if you're involved in the, for instance, on the mailing list. There's one tip. I don't know if you have this on the slide somewhere. It really is important that you read the drafts and the documents that are being discussed at a working group session, because yeah, that will help you understand the discussion, and it'll also help your participation and your contributions to the discussion. Yes, move on. Karen, you have to stop me. I forgot where we said where I would stop, but I think I'm still going on.
Oh, you still have a couple.
Okay. Yeah, so I want to go a little bit into the structure of the IETF. I mean, it's not just one body. As I said earlier, there are some aspects and some kind of subgroups to it. And maybe most important for you here at this point is the blue section there at the right hand side is the IETF with, in this case, 3 different areas, and each area has a working group. And as I said earlier, each area has a number of area directors, and they together form what's called here the IESG, the Internet Engineering Steering Group. And they're basically responsible for the kind of technical oversight of the discussions that happen in the working groups, and also the whole standards process. You see a number of other groups. The pink area on the next to the IETF is the IRTF, is the Internet Research Task Force. They're structured in a similar way, except they have research groups and not working groups. And research, the working group, they form the Internet Research Steering Group in that case. And it's kind of a sister organization to the IETF, and they're also meeting around the same time, and some of the research groups will be meeting during the IETF week. And often research groups can become also working groups later on in the IETF. And then you see the IAB there, it's the Internet Architecture Board. They're kind of having an oversight over the Internet architecture, and they're also responsible to provide a number of liaisons that I mentioned earlier, for instance, to other standards organizations. What else do we have? The Rxc Editor, that's an important function. That's the group of people responsible for the RFCs, for the IETF documents, and also the documents in the standards track. And there is the IANA at the bottom. That's the Internet Assigned Names and Numbers Authority. I guess they're providing the protocol numbers for the IETF, and they come out of the IETF standards process. And then at the top, something relatively new, that's the IETF Administrative LLC, what's that stand for? Limited Liability Company. It's kind of the legal umbrella for the IETF. I think on the next slide, if you go on to the next slide, you see definitions of each of them a bit more. So we have the IESG, responsible for, as I said, the technical side of things, the IRTF doing similar I work for the research groups, and then the IAB keeps an eye on the overall architecture and the standards process, and then the IETF company is kind of the legal umbrella, legal home for the whole IETF entity. Okay, and that's it, I think, right? Karen, you are going to do the next. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Where we talk about the actual IETF week.
Okay, I'm going to talk about basically what happens during an IETF week. Now there will be, and I'm kind of going to try and point out the differences between a ordinary face-to-face IETF week and what's going to be happening in our virtual IETF. Next slide, please. At a high level, the IETF has working group sessions. There's approximately 130 working groups in the IETF. There's going to be some subset meeting. There's a little bit fewer meeting this time than ordinarily, but there is quite a full schedule. There's also birds of a feather sessions, and those are annotated separately. There are IRTF sessions, which is the research task force. There's approximately 15 research groups, and some subset will meet during the week. There are area-wide sessions. So when Miriam was talking about the various areas of the IETF, like the security and the transport area and the internet area, each of these areas will sometimes have an area-wide meeting. It might be a working group, or it might be like the security area advisory group, for example, generally meets, and it's a area-wide discussion. And then there's IETF-wide, which is the full IETF. There will be some plenaries. Sometimes there's 2 plenaries. Often there's only 1. And we occasionally have sponsor-invited lunch talks. Now those will obviously not be occurring this week. At least I don't believe there's going to be a virtual version of that. Also, generally on the weekend before, we have a hackathon and a code sprint. This time the hackathon is actually going to be the week before. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We have some we often have a social event. There's going to be a platform for socializing during this week. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and there'll be more details coming. We often have tutorials or a technology deep dive or some lunch sessions. We will not have any technical tutorials this week. There are a number of pre-recorded technical tutorials that are available on the tutorials page. There will be one deep dive, and we won't be having any lunch sessions this time around. There will be a hot Rfc Lightning Talk, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then finally, there are some side meetings, and there will be a wiki in which to arrange side meetings as well. So next slide. There's also in a normal IETF week, there are a number of other things that are not on the agenda, and that includes things like editing sessions, bar boffs, hallway meetings. These are all ad hoc, and there may be some types of ad hoc meetings this week. This will be up to individuals to schedule them. There is an app. This time, I think that the primary thing that you're really going to want to look at this time is the data tracker and the agenda on the data tracker, because that's going to provide you the links to all of the sessions and the way to connect into all the sessions. It also will provide the access to the Jabber chat client and things like that. Next slide. So IETF108 will be all virtual. It will have all the same basic elements organized into a week-long virtual meeting. All the meetings are going to be from 1100 to 1550 UTC. This is to be roughly equivalent to the time zone that we would have been meeting in physically. All of the information, as I mentioned, will all be linked from the data tracker page. And there's an additional page I would really highlight for you to take a look at it's a session participant guide, and it gives you some basic information on how to make sure, it gives you the schedule for the test sessions that are going to be held next week, and it gives you information on how to get your data tracker login and all of the things that you would ordinarily need to participate. Some of these things are different than they've been in the past. So I would maybe I should highlight that for something in future versions of the slide. But that guide is very important. Next slide, please. So the biggest part of an IETF week are the working group sessions. This is where most of the work is done. A lot of this work is done on mailing lists, and so the session itself will be focused on resolving key open issues. Ordinarily, they will be streamed and recorded. Obviously, everything will be streamed and recorded this time. The key about it, and Miriam mentioned this earlier, is that you really want to have read the agenda. To get the most out of any particular session, you want to understand what the agenda of the meeting is going in, and there won't be a lot of presentations often. It will often be the last version, changes from the last version of a document to this version of a document, and discussing of key issues. So you will want to have read some of those documents in advance. Next slide. There's often birds of a feather sessions. These are used for a number of different things in the IETF, including preceding the formation of a working group. These are generally a little bit higher level. They include discussion of what the charter of the work should be. Sometimes they do them as a one-time activity for something that's not going to become a working group, but it's a timely topic or something that needs to be discussed broadly. It's generally proposed by a group that's interested in the topic, and it's approved by the area directors. Generally, you only have one once. You can notice these on the data tracker agenda by a little bubble that says BOF off to the right on the data tracker. And I believe, if I remember correctly, there's 3 of them for this upcoming week. So those would be more general sessions that would be of interest. Next slide. So the IRTF research group sessions, these are officially an activity of the IAB, and it's generally more research-oriented things. So generally, the idea is that topics that are a little bit more researchy, not quite ready for standardization, might have a research group that would research them, and then some of this stuff might spin off working groups in the IETF eventually. Any IR, like the IETF, the IRTF meetings at an IETF are open to all IETF attendees. There's no requirements to participate. There's often an IRTF open meeting during the week, which will sometimes highlight the ANRP award winners, which are papers that are highlighted, and also any other IETF-wide types of research talks might show up at this IRTF open meeting. Next slide. Once a year, we've been having an applied networking research workshop. This is a way to bring the academic community and the standards community closer together. It's a forum for all of them to come together, and it's more of an academic style of meeting where an author presents his work and then people ask questions about it. So this is work that may or may not ever impact the IETF, but it's related to the work of the IETF. ANRW will be running virtually in parallel to the IETF. The ANRW sessions are linked on the agenda. So you can search on the agenda page for ANRW and it'll show you what the workshop sessions are. I'm thinking that there's 3 or 4. I should have written down the numbers. I looked at them all yesterday to see what they were, and now I've forgotten. So, but you can see those annotated on the agenda. They have ANRW : and then the name of what that session is, and then that session will have papers related to that topic in it. There is a separate registration for IETF108 attendees. It doesn't cost anything, but we do ask that you register separately for the ANRW. Next slide, please. Generally speaking, there are some area-wide sessions, some plenaries, and some invited talks. And you would, often the lunch talks are obviously during lunch. There won't be a lunch break. There will be some coffee break types of times, but there's not an actual separate lunch break. And the the area-wide sessions and the plenary, I believe there's one plenary this time, will be on the agenda. There will be an experiment this time, and I haven't looked to see how it's actually articulated on the agenda, but I believe there's going to be an IAB open meeting, and that will be a session like any other session, but it'll be related to the work of the IAB. Next slide, please. Hackathons and code sprints. So there is a hackathon this time. It is the week before the IETF. If you go to the meeting page for the IETF108, there's a link there for the hackathon, and that'll take you to a separate hackathon page with a registration for the hackathon and a wiki with the projects and things like that. The way the hackathon is going to work this time is there'll be a kickoff session on Monday, the 20th, and then all of the different projects will self-organize themselves throughout the week and work virtually, and then there'll be some sort of a wrap-up session on Friday. The thing to note is also the Newcomers virtual quick connections that I mentioned is going to be on Thursday of that week. So ordinarily, a lot of these activities would happen like Saturday and Sunday, and a lot of those activities that would have ordinarily been in that time frame have been moved into the week before. Next slide, please. Networking and social events. I don't have all of the details of this. I know that there is going to be a platform, a virtual meeting space type of platform where you will be able to go to different spaces and meet with different people. I know that normally there is a physical desk for the IANA staff and a physical desk for the Rfc Editor staff, and they are going to they're going to staff spaces in this virtual space. And so it's going to be, it's a WebRTC based tool that uses Chrome, or WebRTC based tool that creates a virtual space, and you walk around the space and meet people and talk to them. There'll be more details coming out about that as it gets there. A number of us have participated in some demos of that, but I don't have the floor plan or anything like that to show you. But the networking and social aspects of an IETF will be replicated using this platform. Next slide, please. There is more going on. There will be a side meet. There is always the opportunity for side meetings. There is a wiki, and these are self-organized meetings. And so a group of you or a group of people that are working on a specific topic can decide to do the side meeting. And this is the wiki that you go to put all of those details in there, and that way other people that might be interested in it join it. If you're in a particular working group, for example, and you want to have a side meeting on some new work that might be interesting in that working group, then you would go here, you would sign up for your side meeting, and then you might post, in addition to adding it to the wiki, you might say post to the working group that's relevant that you're going to have this side meeting if you wanted to get additional visibility and possibly additional participants. There will be a technical deep dive. This time the topic is going to be on DNS, and you can see that the time slot that it's scheduled in there is 1600 to 1730 UTC on the 23rd. And this will be a more in-depth discussion of the current state of DNS. Hopefully it will be an excellent session. The hot Rfc Lightning Talks. Historically, on Sunday evening, we've had a session on Lightning Talks. These are generally 5 to 10 minute talks on new work or ideas that you might have. There's going to be some sort of an experimental online format, and that information will be coming soon. As you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts to an IETF meeting, and this one is going to be very different than the ones we've done in the past. So before we could tell you definitively, well, this is exactly what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And this time we're like, well, it's going to be a little bit fuzzier than that, but we'll all get there in the end. All right, next slide, please. So some general meeting etiquette. We generally read the documents of interest before the working group sessions, behave respectfully and tolerantly towards all participants, talk and listen to people, enjoy yourself, and a little bit more relevant in a face-to-face meeting where sometimes you can get over committed, remember to sleep. Next slide, please. Bringing new work to the IETF. How am I doing on, where am I? All right. So basically, oftentimes newcomers come to the IETF, or they're interested in the IETF because they're interested in how to bring some new work there. One of the first things that you want to do is to find some collaborators that have a similar interest, because the key to work being successful into the IETF is having a group of a diverse set of participants that are interested in the work. You can write some initial drafts, maybe have some informal barb-offs or some side meetings. Talk to area directors in the relevant areas. So depending on the work that you're interested in doing, there might be like a dispatch group, and you'll see these on the agenda. I didn't speak to them specifically, which I should have. A dispatch group in an area is usually an area-wide meeting that tries to quickly process a bunch of new ideas that are coming in. So somebody comes in and they present their idea, they present their draft, and the group will decide, is it relevant for an existing working group? Is this something that we're ready to take on right now? Do we just want to send it over to this existing working group? Do we want to do some more work on it and come back and maybe propose a separate working group? And it's a way to get some sort of high-level, quick feedback on what the next steps for an idea might be. So that would be something to watch for on the agenda as well. I don't know I know like Sec Dispatch does this for security. And I don't remember if they're meeting this week or not, but that would be one thing to look for. Rich, are you nodding they are meeting, or you're looking to see? So next, after that, you might propose a BOF with an agenda and charter and all of the needed materials that hold the BOF, and then the consensus is the area director and the participants in the room determine the next steps for the work. But before you do any of that, we have done a tutorial on bringing new work to the IETF, and there's links to the slides in the video there. And that actually talks a lot about how to successfully bring work to the IETF. Next slide. So this is the online version of IETF session etiquette. And this, basically the first one is to practice good online meeting practices. So basically test your configuration in advance. The link that I referred to earlier that was a participant guide provides some test opportunities so that you can make sure that your version of your web browser is working correctly and all of that. I think we're all in the current state of affairs. We're all pretty good now at online meetings, but obviously keep yourself muted except when you're speaking. Use a headset if possible. The IETF is a global community, so you want to speak slowly and clearly, be concise, especially in an online version, you lose a little bit of time, so you want to use as few words as possible. I'm not sure that we want to use my current performance as a metric of that, but be concise, slowly, clearly. Technical comments and questions are welcome. The further along a working group is in a particular activity, the less receptive they are to tutorial types of questions, but technical comments and questions are always welcome. And use the Jabber channel. Now, in this context, the chat room on the left-hand side of your the Jabber is incorporated into the Meet Echo tool, and since we will all be virtual and we'll all be using this tool, the Jabber room is there on the left-hand side. So you don't need to bring up a separate Jabber browser unless you want to have other sideline conversations. But for the meeting that you're in, the Jabber room will be attached to your session. Next slide. I think I'm about ready to. Yes, I am. There we go. So Miriam, back to you.
Thanks, Karen. So yeah, I think Karen covered basically the meat of the presentation and the most important parts that are also relevant now for the virtual meeting. So thank you, Karen. So now at the end, we just have a few more slides about some additional information and also some the people that make it all happen and make it, make the IETF work. Maybe some of it is not as relevant now for the virtual meetings, and it will be in for another maybe person meetings, but I still would like to mention all this. So next slide, please. Yeah, so some of the key people, obviously the IETF Secretariat is doing a lot of work in the background and to put it all together. Usually you would see them hang out in their little uniforms, their blue shirts or other colored shirts, but this time you'll probably see them do a lot of work in the background. I don't know how visible it will be. Next slide, please. Then you also have, as Karen already mentioned, often there are physical tables that you can go and meet, for instance, the IANA staff or the Rfc Editor. There might be some side rooms this time where you can talk to them if you have any questions, but they definitely won't have any tables there. So, and IANA always brings sweets, so I look forward to the next physical meeting to meet them there. So next slide, please. A relatively new addition to the IETF is the IETF Executive Director, Jay Daly, who will probably also say a few words, I guess, from time to time during the IETF. So next slide, please. And this is also important, as Karen mentioned at the beginning. I think it was part of the note. Well, there is an anti-harassment policy document also that you can look at. And there are a number of people, the Ombuds team, that you can speak to if you experience any unwanted behavior, even in a virtual meeting. Obviously, this can happen. And so here are the pictures and the names of those 3 Ombuds team members that you can reach out to. And I guess there's also a contact information in the document that's on the slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is also mostly relevant for the physical meetings. I mean, this is some people have. So this is basically an overview of all the different functions that one can have in an IETF, and you can recognize them by different colors, dots or ribbons on the badges. This is maybe not for this virtual meeting so relevant. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is even more stuff to read up on before you participate in an IETF. There's an interesting document at the Tower of the IETF that really goes through a lot of the aspects of the IETF environment and culture and mission and how to behave and what all the background and how to make the best out of it. That's more an overall document, and not specific to not as specific like the participation guide that Karen mentioned. That's more a long-lived document that's relevant also for physical meetings. And then, of course, there's a lot of information for newcomers on this page we already mentioned a few times, and of other tutorials. I don't think there will be any other tutorials this time, Karen, right? Technical tutorials on
there's no more technical tutorials. There will be the DNS deep dive.
Right. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, here's some more mailing lists that might be interesting for you to join. The Newcomers mailing list that you can, I think, subscribe to when you register. And there will be some information relevant to the specific meeting for newcomers mostly. I don't know if you have a link to the actual 108 participants. If there's another attendees list this time, that might be coming on the next slide. I'm not sure. The IETF Sisters, I haven't seen anything. I don't know if they're meeting this time. This is a group of women participants in the IETF, and they're usually meeting during the week, and there's also a mailing list. So if you go to that link, there will be more information. And then, yes, here's more information about the various mailing lists that you can join also. Yeah, lots more. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is important also. As we mentioned a few times, all the information is basically on the data tracker. You can find information about all the working groups and the BOFs and the milestones and documents and RFCs that are on data tracker. And there's also a tools page that you will find some useful tools that the IETF participants are using to find things. Next slide, please. this is the team that makes it all happen here. This platform that we're using right now. At least I'm part of the team, and that's the platform we're using for this tutorial, but also for the IETF week. And yeah, all of the sessions are linked from the data tracker pages, and again, the participants guide that's linked here as well. Next slide, please. Karen mentioned already the Jabber rooms. They will be linked from the actual meeting pages, meeting site, like we're using it now. So you can use that to, just like we're doing now, basically ask questions to other participants, but also about the presentations and the discussion going on in the working group sessions. And yeah, as you can see here, it's going to be integrated in the whole online platform. And you can find more about Jabber and also the underlying protocols on this website. Next slide, please. And that's, I think, brings us almost to the end of the presentation. Yeah, we put this here at the end because, as Karen said earlier on, especially for the physical meetings, it can be quite overwhelming. There are a lot of different sessions, a lot of stuff's going on. And if you're new to the IETF, you want to get the most out of it. So you're often likely to overcommit and to try to go to too many events and participate in too many meetings. Of course, this can also be the case in the virtual meeting, even though the days are a little shorter and there are not as many site meetings and as many parallel events. But yeah, above all, try to enjoy it, get the best out of it. Try to also participate in some of the social events and get to meet people as much as possible in the virtual meeting. And hopefully we'll meet each other again at the future meeting. I think this is the last slide. Oh yeah, of course, very important, the link to the survey, which is, I think, live now, so you can go and you can also tell us what this is the survey for the IETF. This is probably for after. Karen, you have to help me. There's also a survey for the tutorials, right? Or I don't know, maybe we don't have that this time.
No, this is the survey for the Newcomers overview presentation.
Oh,
there'll be a separate survey afterwards for
right. Yes,
the whole IETF.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yes, sorry, I didn't prepare for this last couple of slides. We kind of made some changes before the tutorial. Karen threw these slides on me. I'm like, oh, I'll just figure it out. So yes, but please let us know by either filling in the survey. Please fill in the survey if this tutorial was helpful, if you have suggestions on how to make it better. And also you can reach the education team, the edu team, via this email address.
Right, and as Rich has put in the chat, we do listen to feedback, and so any suggestions that you have, any things that you found confusing, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll try to clarify it going forward. There will be at least one more email going to newcomers that'll have information in it. You should have already received one that includes information about guides and a number of other things. And there will be links to, there'll be a little bit more information about the virtual quick connections and also the newcomer coffee breaks that we're going to do during the week. But we still have a week or two to iron out the details of that.
Matthias is asking here what would be the next newcomer session about. I think if you're referring to the one that's scheduled for in 2 days, that's basically the same. Oh, Rich already answered that. Yes, it's the same tutorial again, just in a slightly different time zone, and for people who maybe didn't have time to participate in this one. Right. So you're welcome to join again. There will be different speakers.
Yes, different speakers. The other thing is that because we had a fair amount of change in this, we will probably have a really quick after this. Did we miss anything? Did we misstate anything? So there might be a corrected version of the slides posted once we figure out what we missed this time around. So,
but if you have any questions now, we have some time, and also once you've gone through the IETF meeting, maybe you go like, oh, I wish I would have known, and I wish the people would have told me in the newcomers session. Then please also let us know. But yeah, if you want to ask any questions now, I don't know how you can either do this in the chat, or I guess you can raise your hand.
Yeah, I think So the Meet Echo interface has changed slightly, but I believe there's an opportunity for people to raise their hands and request audio and speak if you wish. Any additional questions? I think Rich has been pretty on top of answering them as they come.
Yeah, this is very useful. I have three of us here. I guess this was the last slide. Maybe double checking, Alessandro, if there's anything else coming. I think this is the last one. Okay.
Yeah. All righty. Well, if there are no questions, I'm not seeing any in the chat, and I don't believe, maybe Alessandro can tell us if anybody has requested audio. Nope. Okay. Well, with that, I believe we're done. Give you an extra 9 minutes back in your day. Thank you very much for joining us, and we really would appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, thanks. And have a great IETF week.
Yes, have a good week.
And feel free to contact us if you have any additional questions. All right. Bye-bye.
I can stop my video, I guess. Stop video.